Every nation has a story, right? But what's so fascinating about Bangladesh is that its story feels like it was forged twice. First, in this incredible, passionate struggle for its own language. And then, decades later, it was woven into a global powerhouse by the hum of millions of sewing machines. So that's what we're going to dive into today, these two massive foundational pillars. We're going to explore how a fiery fight for words gave birth to the nation's soul, and then we'll see how, years later, the work happening inside its factories built its economic might. It's a pretty amazing journey, from fighting for a voice to literally clothing the world. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with how the nation was forged twice, looking at that fight for a voice and the powerful legacy of its martyrs. Then we'll pivot to see how it wove a new economy and became this massive industrial engine. And finally, we'll look ahead and ask, what's next for Bangladesh? Okay, so let's set the scene. We have to go all the way back to 1947. This is right after the partition of British India. A brand new nation is created, the Dominion of Pakistan. But here's the thing. It was a strangely constructed country from the get-go. It wasn't just divided by ideas. It was literally split in two, with more than 1,000 miles of India sitting right in the middle. And this setup created a massive imbalance right from day one. You had two parts, or wings, West Pakistan and East Pakistan. But just look at these numbers. The folks in the East, who were Bengali speakers, were the overwhelming majority. We're talking 44 million out of 69 million people. But, and this is the crucial part, all the real power, the money, the military, everything, was concentrated in the West. So you can probably guess what happened next. This power imbalance, it didn't take long for it to become a huge problem. The government, sitting over in West Pakistan, makes a monumental decision. They're going to impose one single state language on the entire country. And what language do they pick? Urdu, a language spoken by a minority, completely sidelining the tens of millions of people who spoke Bengali. This was the flashpoint. And they didn't waste any time. The moves were fast and methodical. Right out of the gate in 1947, Bengali just gets dropped from everything official. It's taken off the currency, it's removed from approved subjects. When one brave politician, Dhirendranath Daita, actually stands up and tries to pass a law to protect Bengali, he's just shut down instantly. You have to understand, for the students and thinkers in Dhaka, this wasn't just some boring policy debate. It felt like someone was trying to erase their entire culture. And then came this moment, this one sense. Pakistan's own founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, comes to Dhaka, the heart of the Bengali-speaking region, and declares it. I mean, wow. Can you imagine to say that in that place? It was seen as the ultimate insult. This was the spark that turned the language movement from a protest into a full-blown resistance. So for the next 4 years, this resistance just builds and builds. The tension is simmering right under the surface. And then we get to 1952, and everything that was simmering just boils over. This is where defiance turns into tragedy. And that tragedy, it would become perhaps the single most powerful symbol of Bengali identity. The date you need to remember is February 21st, 1952. The government is getting nervous about the growing protests, so they bring out an old colonial-era law, Section 144, which basically bans any public gatherings. No protests, no meetings, nothing. But the students at the University of Dhaka, they weren't having it. They decided they were not going to be silenced. So they gather, peacefully, right there on their campus. The police show up and try to break it up with tear gas. They start arresting people. But that just makes the students even angrier. They start marching toward the assembly building to make their voices heard. And that's when the police did something unthinkable. They opened fire on unarmed demonstrators. People were killed, students, even a 9-year-old boy. Their names became legendary. They weren't just protesters anymore. They became Shaheed. That's the word for martyr. Martyrs for their mother tongue. And their sacrifice transformed the language movement. It wasn't just political anymore. It became a sacred, deeply emotional cause that united all Bengalis. But here's the thing. Their sacrifice was not in vain. It worked. After years of continued unrest, the central government finally gave in. In 1956, Bengali was officially recognized as a state language. And then, decades later, the entire world took notice when UNESCO declared February 21st to be International Mother Language Day, a global tribute to those who died for something as simple and as profound as the right to speak their own language. Okay, so this fight for language, it was the first crucial step. It really set the stage for a full-blown war for independence. And in 1971, Bangladesh was finally born. But this new nation was facing just crushing poverty. So its second big transformation, its second forging, wasn't going to happen on the streets with protesters. This time it was going to happen in the factories with thread and steel. And it started really, really small. I mean, in 1978, the very first apparel export from the country made a grand total of $69,000. By the early 80s, the whole industry, they call it the RMG sector for ready-made garments, was worth about $31 million. But it was kind of a perfect storm. You had low labor costs, government support, and global trade rules that basically opened a door for new players. These modest numbers were really the seeds of a total economic revolution. Okay, now just look at this. The scale of this explosion is just mind-boggling. We go from about $31 million in the mid-'80s to nearly $40 billion today. That isn't just growth. That's a country completely rewiring its entire economy. It represents millions of jobs, a totally transformed society, and it's what turned Bangladesh into the second largest clothing exporter in the entire world. This phenomenal success has created what is effectively an 80% engine for the entire country. But as you can imagine, when you rely that heavily on just one thing, it gives you incredible power, but it also comes with incredible peril. And this number really tells the whole story, 81.5%. Just let that sink in for a second. More than 4 out of every $5 that Bangladesh earns from the rest of the world comes from selling clothes. It's almost hard to wrap your head around how totally dominant this one single industry is. So where do all these clothes end up? Well, mostly in our closets here in the West. The European Union and the United States are by far the biggest buyers, which means Bangladesh's economy is deeply connected to, and let's be honest, dependent on, the shopping habits of consumers thousands of miles away. So it really is a classic double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have the immense power of it all. This industry employs somewhere around 4 million people. It's been a massive driver for empowering women, giving them economic freedom. But then you flip the sword over and you see the peril. This extreme dependence, the looming loss of special trade benefits, and how vulnerable they are if there's a global recession and people just stop buying new clothes. It's a tricky spot to be in. And that brings us right back to where we started, to those two pillars. You have a nation that first found its soul fighting for its language, then it built its body, its economic strength, through the power of its labor. So the big question now is, what comes next? What's going to be the third pillar? Having secured its cultural voice and built this incredible economic engine, the next great challenge is diversification. How does a country that got so successful doing one thing evolve beyond it? A nation's identity is never really finished, is it? And for Bangladesh, the world is watching to see how it writes this next crucial chapter.